"Don't look between my legs," the nun warned, but when the mountain man did, he, Sister Maria, lived a quiet life high in the mountains, far from the busy towns and noisy cities. Her convent was small, built from rough stone, and surrounded by tall pines and rocky cliffs that seemed to touch the clouds. Every morning she woke before the sun, her room lit only by the soft glow of a single candle. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the smell of pine needles and fresh earth. She enjoyed the silence, the peace that came from living close to nature, and the work that filled her days with purpose. She had chosen this life years ago, leaving behind her family in the familiar streets of her hometown. The mountains had always called to her, offering solitude and a chance to serve others in a place far from distraction. Sister Maria believed that her calling was not just to pray, but to help those who had nowhere else to turn. People sometimes came from distant villages, traveling difficult paths to reach the convent, seeking her guidance or aid, and she welcomed them all with a gentle smile, her eyes filled with warmth and understanding. The convent was simple. There was a small garden where she grew herbs for medicine, a tiny kitchen that always smelled of fresh bread, and a library filled with old books. Sister Maria loved tending to the herbs most of all. Each plant had its purpose, its story, and its power to heal. She could make teas for fevers, poultices for cuts, and tinctures that eased pain. Over the years, she had learned the secrets of the mountain's plants, discovering which ones grew best in the rocky soil and which could save a life. The villagers respected her knowledge, and many called her a healer, though she preferred to think of herself as simply someone who cared. Living in the mountains also meant being careful. The paths were narrow, and the rocks could be slippery after rain. Wild animals sometimes wandered close to the convent, curious but cautious. Sister Maria had learned to respect the mountains, to move quietly, and to notice the signs of nature around her. Birds would signal changes in the weather, and distant sounds often told her when someone approached. She had grown strong and self-reliant, but she was never proud or boastful. Her strength came from years of careful observation, patience, and the quiet discipline of her daily routine. Despite the peace of her life, she was aware of the danger that came with isolation. The mountains were beautiful but could be unforgiving. Travelers sometimes lost their way, and the weather could turn without warning. Sister Maria always made sure that those who came to the convent were safe. She taught them how to walk the paths carefully and warned them about the cliffs and slippery stones, and she had rules for her own safety as well. The convent was open to visitors, but she never allowed anyone to cross boundaries that could endanger trust or respect. She knew that even in the quietest places, a moment of carelessness could cause harm. One of the rules she emphasized most was about personal boundaries. She was careful in her daily tasks, especially when working in the garden or preparing medicines, making sure to maintain respect and dignity for herself and for anyone nearby. She often said that respect was a two-way path. One could not ask for it without giving it. People sometimes laughed or brushed it off, not understanding why such caution was necessary. But Sister Maria knew that teaching respect early prevented misunderstanding and preserved the peaceful life she worked so hard to maintain. Her days were filled with simple routines. Early in the morning, she prayed while the sun rose, the light slowly spreading over the mountain peaks. After prayer, she walked to her garden to tend the herbs, carefully checking each leaf and root. Sometimes she would hum softly, a song learned in her childhood, and the sound seemed to mingle with the wind and the birds. By mid-morning, she would prepare breakfast for any travelers who had arrived overnight. Simple bread, fresh fruit, and herbal tea were enough, and she always offered a kind smile to go with it. Visitors came infrequently, but when they did, Sister Maria welcomed them warmly. She listened to their stories, offered advice when she could, and helped with minor ailments. Some stayed only for a few hours, while others remained for days, drawn by the calm and the care they found at the convent. Sister Maria never judged anyone for their past or their choices. She believed that everyone deserved a chance to rest, to heal, and to learn a little more about themselves. In her eyes, every person was valuable, and every story had meaning. The mountains had their own rhythm, and Sister Maria lived in harmony with it. She knew the signs of approaching storms, the best times to gather herbs, and the way the wind shifted through the trees. She respected the solitude of the mountains, but she also understood the importance of connection. Even in a quiet life, human contact was necessary. She cherished the smiles of children, the gratitude of the sick, and the brief conversations that revealed the strength of strangers. Each encounter left her with a sense of purpose, reminding her why she had chosen this life. Despite her calm exterior, Sister Maria's life was not without challenges. The isolation could feel heavy at times, and the work was often physically demanding. There were days when she had to carry water from distant springs, repair broken roofs, or trek to the nearest village for supplies. She faced these tasks with determination, never complaining, and always remembering the greater purpose behind her efforts. The mountains taught patience and resilience, and she had learned both well. Among the mountain villagers there were whispers about a man named Elias. He was known as the Mountain Man, a solitary figure who roamed the cliffs and valleys with unmatched skill. No one knew much about him, but stories circulated of his strength, his knowledge of the land, and his mysterious ways. Some feared him, thinking him dangerous or unpredictable. Others admired him for his survival skills and deep understanding of nature. Sister Maria had heard the stories but had never met him. She respected his space, knowing that the mountains were his home as much as they were hers. Her life, though peaceful, was defined by caution, respect, and careful observation. Every day brought new lessons, from the smallest plant to the most fleeting interaction with a visitor. She had learned to trust her instincts and to maintain boundaries, knowing that the quiet life she cherished depended on discipline and awareness. And while she welcomed help or company, she never compromised her principles, always reminding herself that the mountains, though beautiful, could also test one's character in unexpected ways. Sister Maria's days were long, yet fulfilling. She watched the sun rise and set over the peaks, tended her garden, cared for the visitors, and reflected on the purpose of her life. In her solitude, she found clarity and strength. She knew that living in harmony with the mountains required more than skill. It required respect, patience, and a deep understanding of the balance between curiosity and caution. And she was determined to live that balance every single day. It was in this careful, disciplined life that Sister Maria prepared for the unexpected. She did not know when a visitor might arrive or what challenges might come with them, but she trusted herself to meet each moment with wisdom and grace. She knew that her work, her prayers, and her careful attention to boundaries would guide her through whatever the mountains had in store. And so, each day, she continued her quiet life, tending the herbs, helping the travelers, and living in harmony with the rugged, beautiful world around her. One cold morning, the wind swept down from the highest peaks, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Sister Maria was already awake as usual, kneeling by her small wooden desk to pray. The mountains were quiet, but she knew the silence could be broken at any moment by someone arriving unexpectedly. She had learned over the years that visitors often came when least expected. Some were sick or lost, while others sought advice, shelter, or just a listening ear. That morning, her quiet routine was interrupted by the sound of crunching footsteps along the snow-covered path. At first, she thought it might be a villager or one of the traveling merchants who occasionally passed through the mountains. But as the figure came closer, she realized it was someone unfamiliar. He moved with a cautious confidence, almost as if he belonged to the mountains themselves. His boots were worn, his coat patched in several places, and his eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the surroundings constantly. Sister Maria could tell he was a man used to surviving in the wild. This was Elias, the mountain man she had heard about in whispers and stories. Tales of his skill, knowledge, and solitude had reached even the distant villages, and some people feared him, without ever meeting him. But Sister Maria did not fear. She had lived among the mountains long enough to understand that people were rarely truly dangerous when approached with respect. She rose from her prayer quietly, smoothing her robe and preparing to greet him. Elias stopped at the edge of the convent's garden. He seemed both cautious and curious, studying the small stone building and the carefully tended herbs. Sister Maria stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Good morning," she said, offering a warm smile. "How may I help you?" The man looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he could trust her. Then he spoke, his voice deep and steady. "I need some medicine for a wounded animal." Sister Maria's eyes softened. Helping others, whether human or animal, was at the heart of her life. "Follow me," she said, motioning him toward the herb garden. "I have what you need, but you must be careful. Some plants can be dangerous if handled incorrectly." Elias nodded and followed, moving with quiet precision. Every step he took seemed deliberate, almost silent, as if he were part of the mountain itself. Sister Maria led him to a small table where she kept her dried herbs and freshly picked leaves. She explained which herbs could heal wounds and which should only be used externally. Elias listened carefully, absorbing every word. As they worked, Sister Maria noticed his curiosity. He asked questions about the herbs, about how they grew, and about their uses. There was a spark in his eyes, a desire to understand and learn. She recognized it immediately. This man was intelligent and observant, but he had a restless curiosity that could lead him into trouble if not guided. At one point, while demonstrating how to prepare a poultice, she turned her back to fetch water. Elias's eyes followed the motion, and she quickly said, almost jokingly but with serious intent, "Don't look between my legs." The words were meant as a warning, a reminder to respect boundaries and maintain trust. Sister Maria had lived long enough to know that even the kindest people could sometimes forget boundaries when curiosity took over. Elias froze for a moment, understanding the meaning behind her words. He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, his tone respectful. There was no mockery, no disrespect, only the recognition that he must follow the rules if he wished to remain welcome. Sister Maria smiled faintly, appreciating his response. Trust was fragile, especially with someone so used to living outside society. As they continued, Sister Maria observed more about Elias. His hands were strong and calloused, evidence of years of labor and survival in the mountains. His eyes moved quickly, scanning each plant, each detail, as if he were learning not only how to help the animal, but also how to understand the world around him. She realized that he was not simply curious about herbs. He was curious about life itself, about people, and about the rules that governed their behavior. The wounded animal, a small mountain goat, was brought to the table, limping slightly and trembling with fear. Elias knelt beside it, gently examining the injury. Sister Maria handed him a poultice and demonstrated how to apply it. He followed her instructions carefully, showing patience and care. The mountain goat seemed to sense his gentle approach, relaxing as the treatment began. Ba 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 ba. While they worked, Sister Maria spoke softly about life in the convent, about the importance of respect, discipline, and patience. Elias listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking thoughtful questions. He was not a man who spoke unnecessarily, but when he did, his words carried weight. She realized that this encounter could be more than just an exchange of knowledge. It could be a lesson in trust, boundaries, and understanding. After treating the animal, Elias sat back on his heels and looked at Sister Maria. "You live a different life here," he said. "It is quiet, but there is strength in it." "Yes," she replied. "Strength comes not only from the body, but from the mind and heart. You can survive in the mountains alone, but living with others, even for a short time, requires more than skill. It requires respect and care." Elias seemed to consider her words carefully. He had spent most of his life relying on himself, trusting only his instincts and knowledge of the land. But now he began to see that there was value in rules, in learning from someone who had dedicated her life to helping others. The idea of trust, of respecting boundaries, was foreign to him in many ways, but it was also intriguing. Before leaving, Elias asked if he could visit the convent again. Sister Maria hesitated for a moment, aware of his curiosity and the lessons he still needed to learn, but she saw sincerity in his eyes. "You may come," she said, "but you must remember the rules. Respect is the most important thing here. Without it, nothing else matters." He nodded again, a quiet promise passing between them. Then, with a careful step, he turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving Sister Maria watching him go. She felt a mixture of caution and hope. He was a man of the mountains, unpredictable and strong. Yet there was a chance he could learn the lessons she had spent years teaching. As the sun climbed higher, Sister Maria returned to her garden, tending the herbs and thinking about the encounter. She knew that living in the mountains required constant awareness, not only of nature but also of the people who entered her life. Elias was different from the usual visitors, curious, observant, and bold in ways that could challenge her patience. Yet she also sensed that he had the capacity to respect the rules and grow in understanding. The day continued with its usual rhythm. Birds sang in the trees, the wind rustled through the branches, and the mountains stood silent and strong. Sister Maria moved carefully among her herbs, occasionally glancing toward the path Elias had taken, wondering when he might return. She had no fear of him, only a quiet understanding that their next meeting could shape both of their lives in ways neither could yet predict. By evening, the sky had turned shades of orange and pink, and the first stars began to appear. Sister Maria lit a candle in the small chapel and knelt to pray. She prayed not only for the people and animals she helped, but also for guidance in dealing with the challenges that unexpected visitors might bring. The mountains were beautiful, but they were also unpredictable, and life in isolation required wisdom and vigilance. That night, as the wind howled gently outside, Sister Maria lay down to rest, her mind still on the mountain man. Elias had entered her life unexpectedly, bringing curiosity, respect, and the potential for learning. She understood that this was only the beginning. The mountains held many lessons, and so did the people who ventured into them. With patience, discipline, and care, she was determined to navigate both wisely. And somewhere in the forest, Elias made his way back to his cabin, thinking about the nun he had met. Her words, her calm presence, and her quiet authority lingered in his mind. He understood that the mountains had taught him survival, but this woman had taught him something else, something he had not expected. The rules of respect, boundaries, and trust were as important as any skill he had learned in the wild. Days passed in the quiet rhythm of the mountains, Yet the memory of Elias lingered in Sister Maria's mind. She went about her daily routines, tending the herbs, preparing meals, and praying in the small chapel, but there was a new sense of awareness in her movements. Every step in the garden, every glance toward the path leading into the forest, reminded her of the mountain man who had appeared so suddenly and so unexpectedly. She did not fear him, but she understood that curiosity, especially when mixed with strength and skill, could lead to complications if left unchecked. Elias, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about the convent. Life in the mountains was his home, and solitude had always been his comfort. Yet meeting Sister Maria had awakened something different in him, a quiet desire to learn not only about herbs or healing, but about the life of someone who lived with discipline, patience, and purpose. He found himself imagining the small stone convent, the neat garden, and the gentle voice of the nun who had warned him with a mix of humor and seriousness. "Don't look between my legs." Those words replayed in his mind, a reminder of boundaries and respect, which felt foreign, but strangely important. One morning Elias returned, carrying supplies from the forest and offering to help Sister Maria with her daily work. She regarded him carefully, knowing that his presence could be both a help and a distraction. "You may stay," she said, "but remember the rules. Respect and patience are required here. Without them, nothing else matters." Elias nodded solemnly. He understood that this was not a suggestion, but a condition for his continued visits. He began helping her in small ways, fetching water, carrying firewood, and tending the animals. His strength made these tasks easier, and his knowledge of the forest proved useful. Yet he also began asking questions about the convent, the herbs, and the daily routines that Sister Maria had followed for years. She answered patiently, recognizing that curiosity was a natural part of learning, but she remained careful to maintain boundaries. Every lesson came with a warning, every demonstration with a reminder of respect. Despite her caution, Sister Maria noticed subtle signs that Elias's curiosity was growing. He watched her closely when she prepared medicines, asked about plants that were unusual, and occasionally lingered in places where he had no reason to be. She knew that curiosity itself was not harmful, but she also understood that if he forgot the rules she had set, trust could be broken. The convent was a place of safety and order, and boundaries were essential for preserving both. One afternoon, while showing him how to prepare a tincture from a rare mountain flower, Sister Maria turned briefly to fetch a bowl of water. Elias's eyes followed the motion, and she spoke softly but firmly. "Remember what I told you. Boundaries are important." He looked away immediately, ashamed for having allowed his curiosity to wander. Sister Maria did not scold him, but her words were enough to remind him that respect was more important than knowledge alone. Elias began to learn not just the techniques of herbal preparation, but the philosophy behind them. Sister Maria explained that every plant had a purpose and every action a consequence. He listened carefully, absorbing not only the lessons of the herbs, but the lessons of discipline and patience. The mountain man, who had spent so many years relying only on instinct, began to see the value in structure, in rules, and in careful observation. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the tension between curiosity and respect grew. Elias found himself wanting to know more than Sister Maria was willing to show. He wanted to explore areas of the convent that had been carefully kept private, to understand the routines she followed when no one was watching. His fascination was not driven by malice, but by an intense desire to understand, to learn, and to connect with a life so different from his own. She observed him carefully, noting the moments when his eyes lingered too long, when his questions became more probing, and when he seemed distracted by what he did not yet understand. She knew that a lesson was needed, not only in herbs but in boundaries. Without it, the trust they had begun to build could crumble. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, Sister Maria decided to address the issue directly. She invited Elias to sit with her in the small courtyard, where the air was cool and the mountains stretched endlessly in every direction. "Elias," she began gently, "you are eager to learn, and that is good. But you must understand that there are limits to what you can know, and respect is more important than knowledge." Elias listened, feeling a mix of admiration and frustration. He wanted to know everything, to understand every secret of the convent and the mountains, but he also recognized the truth in her words. Respect and trust were fragile, easily broken by a moment of carelessness. The lesson was not only about herbs or rules, it was about character, patience, and the responsibility that came with curiosity. From that day forward, Elias tried to control his impulses. He continued helping Sister Maria, learning the techniques she taught and asking questions when appropriate. But he also learned to step back, to observe without touching, and to listen without interrupting. He began to understand that there was value in restraint, that some lessons required patience and time to be fully understood. The mountain man also began to notice subtle details about the convent he had not seen before: the way Sister Maria arranged the herbs, the careful attention she paid to each plant, and the quiet rituals that structured her day. He realized that the convent was more than a place of work. It was a reflection of her character, discipline, and respect for life. Every action, no matter how small, had meaning, and he felt a growing admiration for the nun who had built such a life in the midst of the mountains. At the same time, Elias's visits began to affect Sister Maria as well. She saw in him a mind that could learn, a heart that could care, and a willingness to change. His presence brought new energy to her routines, and she found herself explaining lessons more fully, observing his progress, and guiding him with patience she had not realized she possessed. The bond between them grew, built not on familiarity or casual friendship, but on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Even as trust grew, the mountains remained a constant reminder of the challenges of life. Storms could come suddenly, paths could become dangerous, and the isolation could test patience and skill. Both Sister Maria and Elias understood that life here required awareness, discipline, and cooperation. Their lessons were not only about herbs and rules, but about surviving, respecting, and growing together in a world that demanded both courage and humility. One day, while gathering herbs along a narrow mountain trail, Elias paused to admire the view. The sun had risen, casting golden light over the peaks, and the air was filled with the smell of fresh pine and earth. Sister Maria walked beside him, her hands full of plants, and he realized that their shared experiences were shaping him in ways he had never expected. The lessons were not only practical but moral, teaching him that strength without respect, knowledge without patience, and curiosity without boundaries could lead to trouble. By the time they returned to the convent, Elias had learned to combine his natural instincts with the lessons Sister Maria had patiently taught him. He had begun to see the value of observation, the importance of restraint, and the power of respect. The tension between his curiosity and the boundaries of the convent was still there, but now it was tempered by understanding. He realized that learning to wait, to watch, and to act carefully was as important as any skill he had gained in the mountains. Sister Maria, watching him carefully, felt a quiet satisfaction. Elias was not yet fully guided, but he had taken the first steps toward understanding the principles she held dear. The mountains, the convent, and their shared experiences were teaching him lessons that could not be learned anywhere else. And she knew that if patience continued, this mountain man could grow not only in skill but in character, becoming someone who could respect, care, and live harmoniously with both nature and humanity. The sky turned shades of purple and blue, the stars began to appear, and the wind whispered through the trees. Both Sister Maria and Elias felt the subtle shift in their relationship. Trust had been tested, curiosity had been challenged, and boundaries had been reinforced. And in that careful balance between learning and respect, between curiosity and restraint, something new and meaningful was beginning to grow. A connection built on understanding, patience, and mutual respect that neither of them had anticipated when their paths first crossed. The days in the mountains had grown warmer, and the snow had begun to melt from the peaks. The streams flowed faster, and the scent of wildflowers filled the air. Sister Maria was busy in the herb garden, carefully tending the new growth, while Elias worked nearby, gathering plants from the forest. Their routine had become familiar, comfortable even, but the quiet familiarity carried a hidden tension. Elias's curiosity, though tempered by respect, remained strong. He was learning, observing, and testing boundaries, not out of malice, but because he wanted to understand everything about this world so different from his own. That afternoon, Sister Maria asked Elias to help her prepare a special poultice for a traveler who had arrived earlier with a sprained ankle. She showed him the process carefully, explaining how to crush the leaves, mix them with water, and apply them correctly. Elias followed her instructions, listening closely, but his eyes occasionally drifted toward areas of the garden she had not shown him before. He noticed the arrangement of certain herbs, the hidden spaces between rows, and the tools she used when no one else was watching. A part of him wanted to understand these secrets, to see what Sister Maria kept private. Sister Maria, aware of his glances, decided to address it indirectly. "Elias," she said gently, "curiosity can teach, but it can also distract. You must focus on what is in front of you, not what is hidden." Elias nodded, feeling a mixture of understanding and frustration. He knew she was right. He wanted to see everything, to know everything, but he also wanted to honor her trust. The balance between curiosity and respect felt like walking a narrow mountain path, where one wrong step could lead to a fall. As they worked, a sudden noise came from the nearby forest, a rustling of leaves, the snap of a branch. Elias instinctively moved toward the sound, his instincts from years in the wild kicking in. Sister Maria called him back, gently. "Patience," she said. "Do not act before you understand. Sometimes the world tests you to see if you are ready to learn." Elias stopped, realizing that his training in the mountains had taught him action, but life at the convent was teaching him restraint. He had to learn when to act and when to wait. Later, while preparing the poultice, Sister Maria turned her back to fetch more water. Elias, caught between curiosity and discipline, allowed his eyes to wander briefly toward an area she had warned him about before. Instantly, he remembered her words, "Don't look between my legs." The warning was not about the herbs or the garden. It was about boundaries, respect, and trust. He felt a surge of guilt, realizing he had allowed his curiosity to override his self-control. Sister Maria turned back just in time to see the hesitation in his eyes. She did not speak harshly, but the disappointment was clear in her gaze. Elias immediately looked away and stepped back, his mind racing with understanding. He realized that trust was delicate, and even a brief lapse could damage the bond they had been building. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility, not just for himself, but for the relationship he had with Sister Maria. The rest of the afternoon was quiet. Both of them focused on their tasks, but with a new awareness. Elias worked carefully, his movements deliberate, every action guided by the lessons he had learned over the past weeks. He noticed how much effort Sister Maria put into every small detail, how her focus and patience created order and harmony in the garden, and how every step she took was intentional. The realization deepened his respect for her and strengthened his resolve to follow the rules she had set. That evening, after the traveler had been treated and settled in the guest room, Elias and Sister Maria sat in the courtyard, watching the sun sink behind the peaks. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, yet thoughtful. Elias finally spoke. "I understand now," he said quietly. "It is not just about the herbs or the work. It is about respect, patience, and trust. I cannot see everything, but I can honor what I am shown." Sister Maria nodded, her eyes softening. "Yes," she replied. "Curiosity is a gift, but it must be balanced with understanding and discipline. Learning is not only about seeing, but about listening, observing, and waiting for the right moment. Some lessons come slowly, but they are the ones that last."
Over the next few days, Elias applied this lesson with care.
He continued to help in the garden, gather herbs, and treat small injuries, but he also learned to step back, to observe without touching, and to listen without interrupting. Every time he felt the urge to explore forbidden areas or pry into what he had not been shown, he reminded himself of Sister Maria's warning. Slowly, he realized that the restraint itself was part of the learning process. It taught him discipline, focus, and patience, qualities he had never valued as much before. One afternoon, a new challenge appeared. A young deer had been injured near the edge of the forest, and its cries carried to the convent. Elias and Sister Maria hurried to help. The deer's leg was badly hurt, and it was frightened, thrashing in panic. Elias instinctively moved to restrain it, but Sister Maria stopped him. "Wait," she said. "Let me show you how to calm it first."
Strength alone will not help. You must understand the animal, its fear, and how to earn its trust.
Elias watched carefully, following her instructions. He learned to speak softly, move slowly, and offer comfort before taking action. The deer's panic gradually subsided, and together they applied the treatment. Elias felt a new respect for patience and understanding. He realized that force alone could never replace wisdom and careful observation. A lesson was clear. Curiosity and skill were important, but they must be guided by respect, timing, and empathy. That evening, Elias reflected on the day's events as he sat by the small fire in the courtyard. The mountains were quiet, but the lessons were vivid. He thought about the boundary he had almost crossed days earlier, about the deer they had treated, and about the trust he was building with Sister Maria. Each experience reinforced the importance of discipline, observation, and respect. He understood that boundaries were not limitations, but guides, tools to help him learn and grow without causing harm. Sister Maria, meanwhile, watched the mountains in silence. She had seen the growth in Elias, the way he was learning to balance curiosity with patience and skill with respect. She knew that the turning point had come the day he almost crossed the line, when he allowed his eyes to wander despite the warning. That moment had tested both of them, the trust, the discipline, and the ability to forgive and continue learning. But Elias had learned from it, and that was the most important outcome. The night settled over the convent, the stars twinkling like tiny lanterns in the sky. The air was cool and filled with the scent of pine and earth. Both Sister Maria and Elias knew that life in the mountains was a constant series of lessons. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to test patience, and new ways to grow. The turning point had passed, but the work of learning, observing, and respecting continued. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the trees and the mountains stood tall and eternal, A new understanding had begun to take root between the nun and the mountain man. It was a band built on trust, respect, and the knowledge that curiosity, when guided by discipline, could lead to wisdom. Both of them had learned that strength alone was not enough. Understanding, patience, and careful attention were equally important. The mountain man, once restless and unpredictable, had begun to understand the value of boundaries. Sister Maria, once cautious and reserved, had begun to see the potential in guiding him. Together, they were discovering a balance, a harmony between curiosity and respect, between learning and patience, between the wildness of the mountains and the quiet order of the convent. The days ahead would bring more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to test the trust they had built. But for now, in that quiet evening, they shared a silent understanding. The turning point had passed, and both had grown stronger, wiser, and more connected because of it. The days in the mountains had settled into a quiet rhythm, yet there was a new warmth in the air. The snow had melted further, revealing the bright green of early spring, and wildflowers dotted the meadows with color. The streams, swollen with melted snow, gurgled cheerfully as they wound down through the valleys. Sister Maria went about her work as usual, tending her herbs and preparing meals, but she now noticed subtle changes, not in her routines, but in Elias. The mountain man had grown more patient, more observant, and more thoughtful. His natural curiosity, once restless and impulsive, had been tempered by the lessons of restraint and respect. He still asked questions, still sought to understand the world around him, but he had learned to listen first, to observe, and to act only when appropriate. The transformation had not been sudden. It had taken weeks of gentle guidance, shared labor, and quiet reflection. Yet it was clear to Sister Maria that he had absorbed the essence of her teachings. Elias began to help in ways that were meaningful and careful. He prepared medicines exactly as Sister Maria had taught him, making sure to follow every step with precision. He tended the garden with respect, leaving each plant exactly where it belonged and noticing the smallest changes in their growth. Even the animals, once wary of strangers, had begun to trust him, recognizing the gentle approach he now consistently offered. It was as if he had become part of the rhythm of the convent, blending his strength and skill with the careful discipline of Sister Maria's life. One afternoon, a messenger arrived from a nearby village. A traveler had become sick on the mountain path, and help was urgently needed. Elias and Sister Maria prepared quickly, gathering herbs, making teas, and packing supplies. They traveled together, moving steadily along the narrow mountain trails. Elias led the way, using his knowledge of the land to find the fastest and safest route, while Sister Maria focused on the medicines and the comfort of the traveler. Along the way, Elias faced a moment of temptation. They passed a hidden area of the forest that he had been curious about for weeks. Normally, he might have veered off the path to explore, driven by the restless curiosity that had defined him for so long. But now, he hesitated, then deliberately kept to the trail. The lesson of boundaries, the warning of the nun, the careful guidance he had received, echoed in his mind. He realized that trust and respect were more important than satisfying curiosity, and he stayed the course. When they arrived at the traveler, Elias assisted Sister Maria in applying treatments and ensuring the patient's comfort. He noticed the small details she emphasized: the proper temperature for teas, the right placement of a poultice, the gentle reassurance needed to calm fear. Every action reflected the lessons he had learned: patience, observation, empathy, and respect. The traveler's recovery was steady, and the gratitude in their eyes mirrored the quiet pride Elias felt in his own growth. After returning to the convent, Elias and Sister Maria took a quiet moment in the courtyard. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the mountains. Birds sang their evening songs, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and fresh earth. For a long while, neither spoke, each reflecting on the journey they had shared. Finally, Sister Maria broke the silence. "Elias, you have learned much," she said gently, "not only about herbs and healing, but about trust, patience, and respect. These lessons will guide you far beyond these mountains." Elias nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He had always relied on his instincts, his strength, and his knowledge of the land. But the time spent at the convent had taught him something different, something that could not be learned in solitude or through force, alone. He had learned to temper curiosity with patience, skill with empathy, and freedom with responsibility. The lessons were subtle but profound, and they had changed him in ways he had not anticipated. In the following weeks, their routines continued, but the dynamic between them had shifted. Elias no longer approached tasks with restless energy. Sister Maria noticed his attentiveness, his careful handling of the herbs, and his thoughtful approach to every situation. Their interactions were no longer teacher and student in the strictest sense. They had become partners in a shared pursuit of understanding, care, and harmony. Trust had been tested, boundaries had been respected, and the bond between them had deepened. One morning, a small group of travelers arrived at the convent, bringing news of the wider world beyond the mountains. Elias listened quietly as Sister Maria welcomed them, observing the interactions, offering help, and ensuring that everyone was treated with care and respect. He realized how much he had changed. The man who once relied only on strength and instinct was now capable of empathy, understanding, and gentle guidance. The lessons of the convent were no longer confined to the garden or the herbs. They were part of him, shaping his actions and thoughts. Sister Maria watched him with quiet satisfaction. She had known from the beginning that Elias had potential, but she had also known the challenges of guiding someone so accustomed to solitude and instinct. The process had required patience, gentle correction, and careful instruction, but it had worked. The mountain man had grown not only in skill but in character, demonstrating that even the most restless spirit could learn discipline and respect when guided with wisdom and care. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks and the stars began to emerge, Elias and Sister Maria stood together on a small balcony of the convent. The mountains stretched endlessly before them, bathed in soft moonlight. Elias spoke quietly, his voice thoughtful. "I never knew that patience and respect could be so powerful," he said. "I thought strength and knowledge were enough, but now I see that understanding and trust matter even more." Sister Maria smiled, her eyes reflecting the glow of the moon.
"Yes," she replied. "Where?"
"Strength and skill are important, but they must be guided by wisdom, empathy, and patience. True learning comes not from rushing or demanding, but from observing, listening, and acting with care. You have embraced these lessons well." In the months that followed, Elias continued to visit the convent regularly, helping with the garden, the animals, and the travelers who sought aid. The bond between him and Sister Maria remained strong, built on shared experience, trust, and mutual respect. He had become a part of the community in his own way, a quiet guardian of the convent and the surrounding mountains. His presence was a reminder that learning, growth, and understanding could come even to those who seemed most wild and independent. Sister Maria, in turn, found joy in seeing the results of her guidance. She had always known that teaching was about more than instruction. It was about shaping character, building trust, and nurturing growth. Elias had proven that lessons, when delivered with patience and care, could transform even the most instinct-driven person. The convent, once a place of solitude and quiet work, had become a place of shared learning, reflection, and harmony. And so life continued in the mountains. The seasons changed, the streams flowed, and the garden flourished under the careful attention of both the nun and the mountain man. Their days were filled with work, reflection, and quiet moments of observation. Trust had been tested and strengthened, curiosity had been guided, and boundaries had been respected. Together they had learned that harmony between strength and patience, freedom and responsibility, curiosity and respect was possible even in the most challenging of environments. In the end, Elias returned to the mountains not just as a survivor, but as a man transformed. He had learned that true strength was not measured by physical skill alone, but by character, empathy, and the ability to act wisely. Sister Maria continued her quiet life in the convent, her work enriched by the presence of someone who had learned to respect, observe, and grow. The bond they shared remained quiet but powerful, a reminder that even in isolation, lessons could be learned, trust could be built, and respect could guide actions. The mountains stood as silent witnesses to their journey, their peaks and valleys reflecting the balance they had achieved between curiosity and patience, strength and restraint, learning and understanding. And as the sun rose each morning, casting light over the convent and the surrounding peaks, both Sister Maria and Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. The turning points, the lessons, and the moments of challenge had led to growth, understanding, and a bond that could endure. The mountains, the convent, and their shared experiences had created something lasting, a connection built on trust, respect, and the knowledge that learning is a journey, guided not only by curiosity, but by patience and care.